All right, carbon credit schemes. They're one of the biggest financial frauds in the climate space, designed to help governments and businesses offset carbon dioxide emissions. But in reality, they've become a haven for shysters and organised crime gangs. That's not me saying that. The UN found all of this. The EU found all of this out in recent inquiries too, rarely delivering the offsets they've promised. Last year, Andrew McIntosh, the former head of the government's Emissions Reduction Assurance Committee, blew the whistle on the Australian carbon credit unit system, arguing it was a fraud and had wasted more than $1 billion of your money as taxpayers. So in July, the newly elected Albanese government, they commissioned a review of the scheme. Former Chief Scientist Ian Chubb was appointed. Now, with little media scrutiny, no fanfare, his report went back to the government in January. And incredibly, he dismissed the claims from the whistleblower that the system lacked integrity. Now, Andrew McIntosh is not happy with that report as it landed in January. He's published a paper criticising the Chubb report. And he wrote, and I'll quote him now, the review panel's findings on the method are unsubstantiated and incomplete, and its recommendations are tortured, whereby they do not explicitly state there are any problems, but implicitly acknowledge the underlying issues and recommend they be fixed. Joining me now to discuss all this pretty complex, very important detail, Environment Editor at The Australian, Graham Lloyd. I've always argued, Graham Lloyd, these offset schemes, particularly the ones with international credits, are a complete and utter sham. Are you surprised by the whistleblower's comments at the time and that they weren't then really pursued in this review?
Well, there's a few things going on, Peter, and you have to say that these schemes have been around for a couple of decades internationally, and they have been an absolute honeypot for organised crime, particularly the Russian crime gangs and everything. They were right into it and rorting billions and billions of dollars. What's happened in Australia is there's concern about whether the carbon offsets that are being sold are a genuine offset, whether the carbon is being stored, whether it's going to remain stored for long enough, whether it's something happening that was going to happen anyway, so why should the government be paying for it? Those sort of specific concerns were raised, and it's probably a little surprise. The Chubb review did what a lot of government reviews do. They didn't look at the detail of the complaint. They looked at the broad ethic of things, and the report was, well, look, we'll put in some more governance measures and things like that without actually addressing what the complaint was in the first place. But there's a desperation really for the government to keep this scheme alive, because it is the root of their safeguards mechanism. If they don't have permits to trade, they really don't have a plan.
But if we've already blown $1 billion, as McIntosh said, and he's the guy that, you know, understands this intimately, if we've already blown $1 billion of taxpayers' money, we're just papering over the cracks if we keep this dodgy system going.
Well, we really need to put some integrity into it. And I think the corporate sector, which is saying, look, we want to participate in this sort of thing, and you've got to say, done well, land repair and sort of co-benefits is probably a very beneficial thing. But I spoke recently to Telstra, who'd been trying to invest in this space and get some value for the money, and they ended up doing their own thing because they really couldn't find opportunities that they were confident in.
All right, I want to pick up another issue. A brilliant article today from former Labor MP, ACTU President Jennie George in The Australian, sounding the alarm over the serious consequences of shutting down coal and gas without having any baseload replacements. Graham, Jennie pointed in her column the Liddell power plant in the Hunter set to close in only 2 months' time. Now, that's crept up on us. End of April, I think the date is. That's 10% of the power supply in New South Wales gone overnight. Eraring, well, it shut down 3 years later. That's another 25% of supply gone. And Jennie George, Labor Jennie George, says there's nothing realistically in the pipeline to replace these projects. And she's right, isn't she?
She is, and Jennie George is a prolific writer on this subject, and she's very well informed. She's obviously coming from the point of view of having sort of worked in the industry where these things happen and employ people, and she's making the point that, look, all this stuff is going out of the system, has been planned, and everything that was supposed to replace it has either failed or not been delivered. We were speaking recently about the LNG terminal that was going to import LNG to fire up a gas turbine to replace some of this capacity. Well, that's all fallen over. So the squeeze is really coming, and Jennie George is making the point that if you don't actually get something physical to replace what you're closing, you've got a world of pain and problems.
We're being warned too, just on the Murray-Darling Basin, this is water now, that there's a looming fight. All the ministers and the Environment Minister, Tanya Plibersek, will meet next week, I think it is. There's some challenges with the plan. They seem all to be against her. You'll tell me more. $13 billion plan, though. How can we still be trying to fix the Murray-Darling Basin?
Well, this is an issue that's defeated everybody who's tried, isn't it? And the root problem is that it's a single water source that flows across multiple boundaries in different states. So every state has a different self-interest, and then you get down to the various communities that end up bearing the cost. There's been two approaches to trying to save water for the environment, and one was to improve efficiencies in the way water was used on farm, and the other was to buy the water licences back from farmers. That has impacts on rural communities that depend on having that critical mass. Tanya Plibersek is the latest in a long line who are going to try and broker a solution to how the water should be shared, and we'll have to see how she goes.
All right, we'll leave it there. Graham Lloyd, thank you.